Now, to finish this exposition, let's talk a little bit on how do I debug my kit? How do I find problems? What's happening with my kit? Something doesn't work and I don't know where to start searching for problems. This is kind of a Sherlock Holmes work, and it's good to have some guidance and on how to start, where to start, which are the best tools that I have on my hand to see what's happening. So I'm going to try to give you some tips and some tools that will help you debug with more ease and faster. Okay. First of all, it's important, we already explained those in the previous webinar, but it's important to understand the LED, which type of states are when something is not working. We have error state and warning state. Error is really bad. Something is going wrong, and if you don't do something about it, you won't get data. And you will lose the data from the period while the kit was in error mode. So it's important to recognize it to be able to fix it as soon as possible. The LED will blink really, really hard, meaning it goes from completely off to blue in the case of a network configuration. And in the case of a warning, it's a mild blink. It doesn't turn off completely never, so you don't feel that it's blinking so hard. When the blink is hard, there could be several problems. We're going to check them in a second, but you need to pay attention to it. And on warning, the state is not as bad because it means that the kit still gathers data, but he's not being able to publish it. He cannot send it to the platform or cannot save it to the SD card in the SD card mode. But he's not losing data because he can save that data internally. But something is not working. So unless you understand why the kit is on warning mode, for example, if you know that you got the kit on a bicycle and you're outside and the Wi-Fi is not available at that point, then you understand why the kit is complaining, but you know there's no problem because when you come back home, the Wi-Fi will be available again. So if you understand what's the problem, don't pay attention to it. But if you don't understand, it's important to see what's happening because the data won't arrive to the platform or won't be on the SD card when you take it out. First of all, always start from a clean state. Reset your kit because something could got messed up. Something can be wrong on the temporary configuration or on memory. So reset your kit before starting to debug the process. Sometimes the error was a temporary error that resetting the kit can fix it. And if that's not the case, then at least you know that you're starting from zero and that the error can be recognized easily. The LED will give you a lot of simple, but a lot of information. The blinking that we already explained. And also keep in mind that we have, I don't know if you can see them on screen, but a couple of LEDs on the top that showcase information about Wi-Fi connection and serial connection. The Wi-Fi specifically can give us information about the type of error that's happening if there's a connectivity error. We're going to see that in a second. And then, as you have seen during this webinar, the serial monitor is pretty useful. It gives us a lot of information and we can even ask questions to the kit. So if you are working a lot with kits, it's pretty good that you set up a computer at least with the Arduino IDE or a more advanced serial monitor, so you can check what's happening with your kits. And so you can reconfigure or fix any of those errors. Okay, moving on. Connectivity issues. This is the most common problems that we have, and I'm going to cover the most common issues that we have found during the years. The most common one, and it's not to blame anyone because we all make mistakes, and normally humans, we make more mistakes than machines in this matter, is a misspelled SSID or password. because since we have to type it by hand and we don't select the network, if we do it via commands, in the phone we can select it, but then we have to type the password. It's pretty common to type it wrong. The kit won't be able to connect, and if it's the first time he's connecting, he will say this is an error. It's not a warning, because I don't have the time. He hasn't been able to connect never to the network, so some things are still not configured. Okay, so this is pretty easy to check. It's just, if you have a terminal connection, it's pretty easy. Just type config and you will get the actual config, and you can check if it's well typed. And if you don't have terminal, it's a little bit more cumbersome, but you can do it putting your kit in setup mode and connecting with the phone to check or at least to try to re-enter the Wi-Fi and the password. I'm saying this because most of the cases that happens. It happens to us a lot because it's pretty easy to get into there, and we are searching for complex problems, and not, the problem was only the password wasn't typed correctly. Okay, now supported Wi-Fi. Sometimes all the data, all the configuration is correct, but still the kit doesn't connect to the Wi-Fi. That could be because your Wi-Fi is 5G Wi-Fi, for example. They are more common every day, and the ESP, the Wi-Fi chip on the kit doesn't support those networks, or you have a edu-ROAM, or you have an enterprise network. In the documentation, you can check what's supported and what's not supported, but could be a problem of the Wi-Fi itself and not on the kit side. Another common problem in connectivity is that the kit is too far away from the Wi-Fi network. The simplest way to check that is to take it closer to the Wi-Fi network temporarily and see if the error is fixed, and then see how far away we can go with the kit. Keep in mind that the antenna of the kit is not as big as the normal antennas in mobile phones or computers. So sometimes range for the kit is a little bit smaller than we are used to in a specific Wi-Fi network. And another connectivity problem that's common, not at home and not with normal Wi-Fi routers, but with when we set up kits in universities or with city council Wi-Fi networks or any shared network, is that sometimes they have firewalls that block some access to the network, and then the kit maybe thinks he's sending, but the package is not passing through. So it's important, if you find a strange problem around connectivity, to check the kit in a normal Wi-Fi network to see if everything is working in that case, and then to move it again to the network that's failing to try to isolate the problem. Those problems can be complex, and in the documentation there's a lot of data around those. I'm not going to cover them during the webinar because they can be pretty different and pretty complex. But the main thing that you need to do at the beginning is to isolate that the problem belongs to something in the network and not in the kit. This problem has its own slide because it's difficult to catch. If we type the token wrong, when we input that token to the kit, everything seems to be okay because the kit thinks his token is correct. He gets data, he sends the data to the network, the data is received on the network, but the platform doesn't know who owns that data. So at the end, that data is lost. But the kit has no way to understand that the problem exists. So he will say everything is okay and everything seems to be nice, but when you go to the platform, there's no data there, okay? So if that happened to you, think that the token may be misspelled and recheck the token or retype the token. In the case that the token seems to be correct, there's also the possibility that you get it wrong from the onboarding process. So it's an option is to redo the onboarding process or use another token from another kit that you know it's working, or even write an email to support to ask for your token. This is a little bit more advanced, but when you connect external sensors, that in the MINKE project case, most of the setups have external sensors, there's also the possibility that some sensors are not properly detected. You're getting data on the platform, everything seems to be fine, but I'm missing dissolved oxygen. What's happening here? You know? The only real way to try to solve this problem, well, the first obvious option is just check connections on the cables and that everything is connected, and then reset the kit and see that, check if that fixed the problem. But if it wasn't fixed by that, the only real way to debug that is connecting to the kit via the terminal and read messages. When the kit starts, you will see messages about detecting external sensors. If the sensor is detected, but then the reading is not arriving to the platform, the problem is different. But if you don't find the sensor in the detection at the beginning of the messages, then you know that something is wrong either with the sensor or either with the cabling. And most probable problem is that there's a hardware issue with the sensor. Okay, so reading messages, it's a really important thing in this case, to be able to get enough data so we can help you from support, or someone in the forum can give you ideas on, well, how to try to solve the issue. Okay, if you remember the sensor command that we use at some point that lists the sensors, that can also give you information about which ones were detected properly. There is also another command called I2C that's a little bit more advanced that will show you in a low-level address way which sensors are connected with an address. Sometimes this command can be useful when you are receiving help from staff, or if you understand how an I2C network of sensors work. And at the end, booting problems. My kit doesn't start, it gets stuck at some point. The first thing that you need to do is try to isolate at which stage your kit is getting stuck, so you can try to find a solution. The color of the LED is the best approach for this problem, because since the kit is not starting properly, you won't have access via a shell, okay? So if your kit doesn't light, nothing has any light, the problem could be a hardware problem. That's the first guess. Something was damaged in the kit, so energy is not arriving, or the chip is not able to boot. Or another option is that the bootloader, on the previous webinar we mentioned it a little bit, but I'm going to explain briefly what it is. The bootloader is a small piece of software that runs in the main chip. You remember that we learned today how to upgrade the firmware. But before the firmware, there is a really small piece of software that takes care of the booting process. The same as in a computer, there is the BIOS that selects the disk and then calls Windows or calls Linux or calls whatever OS you use. In this case, we have a really small piece of software that calls the firmware itself. And if that software is damaged for some reason, then the kit is unable to boot. The good thing is that we can identify the problem pretty easily because the kit doesn't do anything. So either we have a hardware problem or a bootloader problem. The only way to recover the bootloader is with a specific external hardware, a programmer that is normally not around for anyone that doesn't work in microcontroller things. This can be solved also via do-it-yourself hardware with a Raspberry Pi. We have a guide on the documentation of a Smart Citizen on how to do that, but it's a pretty advanced thing. So if your kit doesn't light, the most probable option you have is to call to support and send your kit back so it's checked by us. Then, if your kit lights but it's stuck at green, it means that the bootloader is working because he managed to light the LED in green, but he's not able to find any other program to run. That means that probably your software got damaged for some reason. But that's easy to fix by yourself by just doing the same process that you do when you upgrade your firmware. You download the firmware from the GitHub repository and you just drag it to your kit after double clicking the reset button. That should fix a green stock kit. If that doesn't fix it, then the problem needs more attention and it's a more strange problem. But the most common one is that the firmware was damaged for some reason. The next stage on the boot process is white. White, the kit is detecting sensors and starting the systems, the internal systems. The most common reason for getting stuck in white is that external sensors are misbehaving. When we have external stations with a lot of sensors, some cables are not connected properly, something is wrong, and something is stopping the process. So the first way of finding out that is disconnect all the external sensors, check if the kit works. And if it does work, then you can little by little go isolating which is the sensor that is misbehaving and check the cabling and check the sensor itself. Something else that can happen, and that happens sometimes, is arriving to green and then getting off again, in green and off again. That means that the kit is not being able to properly start because he's not receiving enough power to start. So he tries, but when he starts turning on systems, the power is not good enough and he reboots. Okay, if that's the problem that you find, try connecting your kit via USB or changing the power source or changing the battery to see if that fixes the problem. The most common one is a bad cable, a bad USB cable that's not able to give enough power to the kit. So try changing the power hardware to see if that fixes the problem.